We're gonna share today the top 6 things to do.
You know, your vision that you fall in love with could be nothing. This one is probably the most underrated.
And probably the most important that we...
Could definitely be the most important.
So today we're coming at you with some info. We have land hunted for a whole year. We started 1 year in June, ended the next year in June, trying to find our perfect plot of land in the Bay Area in California, which is an incredibly expensive place to live. So the area that we're in, 1, doesn't have much land, and 2, it's always on the top of the list for most expensive places to live ever. We wanted to stay in this area because we love it, and the reason we decided to build and even search for raw land is so that we could stay. But along the journey of the year of searching, we learned a whole lot. So we're going to share today the top 6 things to do that by the end of our journey we got really good at, and at the beginning we just had no idea. So hopefully this helps someone out there who is looking to buy raw land, build something off grid, or just want some more information for one day when they want to do this.
Or invest in property. It's a skill set that you can use for investing in property. So you can't supplement experience, but I think this video should be a good guide so that you can get good experience as you start.
Yeah, just a good jump off point. It was something that we would have really liked, things that we would have liked to know when we started. So here we go. So the first thing that's probably going to seem the most obvious is to make a list of your criteria.
When you make the criteria, you might be disillusioned that these are the things we want to do. You're never going to find everything. So what you really do need to do is make a list of criteria and then make a non-negotiable that's virtually 1 or 2 items maximum.
That you absolutely have to have, no questions asked.
At least in our area, you can't have a list of 10 things that are non-negotiable. It's never going to happen here. Maybe elsewhere outside of the Bay Area, you might get a longer list, but in our experience, our non-negotiables were 2 maximum, a lot of times 1.
We're very slim. So like I said, the thing that was our top thing that we were not willing to negotiate on was location. So we narrowed down the area we wanted to live in, and that was by far the most important thing that we weren't willing to sacrifice. We did look at a couple things outside of the area just because you have to give everything a chance, whether it was a budget reason we went outside of our area or something in the listing really thought might have grabbed us. We did look, but that was something we both knew that we wanted to live within an hour of a certain space. 1, because our family, we want to be able to see them, and based on where they lived, we wanted to be convenient, and just because it's our favorite place on the planet, so we didn't want to leave. The second non-negotiable we had,
cell service. So communication's a must. Emergencies, just getting anything done is virtually impossible, especially if you're a little bit off grid or 20-30 minutes out. You can't drive 30 minutes to tell somebody something, so that's a must. So the negotiable items for us were really budget, and then a water source, because we knew that we could make that contingent on an offer. Power was negotiable because we had plans to be sort of off-grid with solar and lithium iron phosphate batteries. So that was really something that wasn't even going to be a part of a contingency. And then septic, which is your leach field, and percolation tests of the soil. If it's a large enough property, generally you can find soil that's going to perk. If not, that could also be part of the contingency period, 3 months, 6 months, whatever, and you could get somebody out to the property to test drill a well or ultrasonic the ground to figure out if there's water and how deep and things like that. So those were negotiable. They would be nice if it had a well and if it was perked and had power, but in a nutshell, those were things that were negotiable.
Yeah, the next thing to do when you're looking for land is research. So Kirk was in charge of most of the research because although I'm really good at it, he exceeds expectations here. So some of the things that are important to know before you go out there are the preliminary title report and APN.
Yeah, so the APN is the assessor parcel number. When you don't have an address, that's your address, and that's how you orient. So yeah, the number one thing for us, we would go out before we had all that stuff just on the listing and try to find it. And this is another thing, another item that comes later. But yeah, definitely we had to get the disclosure reports, which gave us the APN, which then gave us orientation to the property. And then also before we went to the property, reading that preliminary title report and understanding what were the easements, what did it look like legally, what was the history,
emergency egresses, zoning,
all that type of stuff. Before you go out, you want to understand if it's even worth driving to, because there might be something that looks beautiful and then it's just not even zoned for residential.
And one of the big ones was we found this beautiful piece that we really loved, and there was an easement that went right through the flat area where you would want to build the house. So it kind of made the whole property useless, at least for us, because where we would want to build, there was an easement, basically a shared area that you could not build on. So it could be a deal breaker if you don't know where those easements are and do that research.
Yeah, that one was an interesting one because we wanted kind of like a valet parking, and the property was absolutely perfect for it.
Yep.
If you put the house right in the middle of the easement, there was room to put the house off of the easement, but then you just have your standard driveway in and out where everybody's blocking, which we didn't want. So that type of stuff is really important to understand, because if you didn't understand it and you walk out and you're like, this is perfect, blah, 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 you got to understand those things. And then the plat maps, color-coded easement maps, those are things, the overhead maps that'll tell you where, survey spikes and things are, where the easements run. They're kind of shaded or have like a dotted lines and things like that. When you are out walking the land, which is something that you have to do, you want to have that in hand and have studied that.
Because we definitely walked on someone's property that was not for sale. And he promptly drove up to let us know we were in the wrong area. Still my most embarrassing moment. Next thing on the list is drive to the location.
I think this one's obvious. Like I said, we drove to properties where we didn't even know where the APN location was, and we would go kind of where it said it was, and we wouldn't be able to even find it. So we adjusted on that. But one thing through that process we learned that was valuable was even if you couldn't find it, you could know as you drove to it whether or not you even wanted to find it, right? So we drove into areas where it didn't even matter if we found it, because we knew on the drive it was basically a deal breaker. And that's what drives this kind of item, which is even if you don't know exactly where it's at, if you can just drive to the general area, you can get a ton of information. And I would actually argue that even if you don't find it,
you know enough.
You're about 80% of the way there to know whether or not you want to actually walk the land.
Yeah, because our drive, since we were looking semi-off grid, we were driving in mountainous areas over cliff sides that were unpaved dirt roads. We were driving in places
roads that fell off.
Roads that completely fell off. We saw mudslides that had happened. Yeah, we would drive places knowing if we move here, nobody's coming here more than once because the drives were way too scary.
Or, 100-foot tall trees for miles and miles, so it's just shade forever. You
dark
never ever
and
see
wet
the sun.
and cold.
Yeah, everything is, the soil's muddy all the time because no sun ever gets in there. So those types of things can give you the vibe just right off top. So just driving it is so important. I mean, this is something that you would do if you were going house shopping. You want to see the neighborhood, see the parks. This is similar, but you're just a little bit more observant of sort of the natural area.
Yeah. Well, and we even had conversations, two things of, would I be able to drive it by myself because I'm not the greatest driver? And two, would we have to buy different cars? Because some of the time we would drive there and go, there's no way we can drive a Prius up here. We'd have to sell the car and we'd have to get off-road vehicles, which again goes back to the visitors thing.
Or conversely, I can't get a big truck and trailer here because this is a ridiculous road. Right?
Yeah, if we build something and we need a big machine, how is that even going to work?
Yeah.
Yeah, so driving is...
Watch our episode on the RV towing and see what we mean.
Oh, you'll see. So one other thing about driving to the land that we always checked is how far we were from civilization. So basically, where's the nearest gas station, grocery store, and hardware store, especially because we're doing the build ourselves. If we are missing a part during the build, is it going to take us an hour to get to the nearest hardware store? So that was something that also played into the drive as well.
And it's a fun thing to do.
Especially that time we ran out of gas in the mountains and the nearest gas station.
Not a fun thing to do.
That was not fun and not something we wanted to do on a regular basis. Good story though.
We alluded to this earlier, but you have to walk/hike the land, and if you can, take measurements. This is just an absolute must. You can't just peek at it. You have to hike it, find the boundary lines, find the survey sticks.
Which means bring hiking shoes. The amount of times I showed up in Toms and in flip-flops, even towards the end of our hunt, was not helpful, but don't do that.
I would measure grade with the rotary laser level, because there's, building requirements and egress requirements for how steep it can be, which can be deal breakers. How long the driveway or the access road is a direct cost. Like you spend $10,000 for a 2-car, parking spot at your house. Now make that 500 feet long, right? So knowing those measurements and how much concrete and stuff gives you an idea just what the scale is to start to build.
Yeah.
Or to even think about starting.
And I got to do the fun stuff, like imagine where the house is going to be. So while he was measuring things, I'd go, the kitchen could be this way. We could have a deck going this way. And just...
She's talking about orientation of the house. And
orientation of the house. But it's important to look at stuff like that going, is there any way that we would want the house to face? Is there anything to look at? Because
where does the light come from? What's northeast, south, and west? Where does the pad face? How can we get cars in? How would the garage or how would the house fit? Where do the views go? What's the shade like? Where are the trees?
Well, especially on the mountainside, where we live, one side of the mountain gets shade early in the day and the other side of the mountains doesn't get shade until, early, late evening.
Yeah.
So do you want to be on the sunny side of a ridge? Do you want to be on the shadowy side of a ridge? It gets really detailed, but you can imagine things like, do you want morning light to come into your kitchen or do you want the morning light to come into your bedroom?
One thing we didn't even consider that I learned was we had a pond that was kind of obscured by brush, and that can bring bugs. So you don't want, you want to, if your house is up against the pond,
source,
like you want to at least be far enough away to where the bugs aren't congregating to your outdoor area, stuff like that,
Yeah, wildlife activity. If you want there to be wildlife, is there turkeys that are going to be wandering your property? Is that going to be a deal breaker? Were you imagining more of a suburban lifestyle?
Where are the views?
Yeah. Or do you want to watch the hawks go and hunt the mice in the field?
So that's important for walking the land, not just walking, but really looking at the full 3D orientation and, overhead where stuff's at. And this is why you have to study the plat maps and the easements, because you could be standing in the most perfect spot that has an easement for a road or whatever, or a utility. So your vision that you fall in love with could be nothing if you don't understand the preliminary title report and stuff like that. So that's why it's important.
And I think it goes without saying, because when you're thinking of buying anything or even doing something like planning an event, you go to a space and you can kind of imagine if you can live there forever. When you walk into a home, if you're buying a home, you go, I can see us living here. It's the same thing when you're looking for land. You can hear the quietness or the road noise. Kirk was really not into road noise. So if we ended up being by a road and we were there and there was road noise, it was almost an automatic out for him of nope.
We found a spectacular property, pretty secluded, trees that block virtually all neighbors, view of a beautiful mountain, a prolific mountain in Contra Costa County, but the road noise on the street, that's all I could hear.
He could not handle it. Everything else was ugly once he heard the road noise. So where that might not be an issue for anyone else when I was up there, it was like white noise to me, but for him, that white noise was absolute no for him. So being there, we wouldn't have known that otherwise until we set our foot there and he heard the noise and said no.
You don't get that on Google Maps. You don't get that driving by.
In the listing description, it doesn't say road noise.
Have to walk the land. Have to walk.
Or if you're en route of an airplane, like
overhead on the flight.
We heard airplanes over certain ones where they were low flying over that area. So just experiencing things like noise in the area, you won't know unless you're there.
This one is probably the most underrated.
And probably the most important that we...
Could definitely be the most important.
Yeah. We were both shocked by this one. We had no idea.
Yeah, and that's really talking to the neighbors. Like once you've walked it and seen it, maybe been back a couple times and you really want intel, like you've done the prelim, you've done the plat map, you've walked, you've seen the survey sites, you've gone... Oh, when you go, try to do it in several different times a day, morning, evening, and night. That's another thing we kind of didn't touch on. Once you've done all that and you think that this could be it,
talk to a neighbor, at least
find out who the neighbors are.
If you can talk to multiple neighbors, even better. It is incredible the amount of stuff you can find out from the neighbors. We found out at one property that we loved and wanted to pull the trigger on. We found out about the maximum amount of families were tapped into the sewer line. So they were letting us know that we needed to check to see if we would be able to tap into the sewer or if we'd have to have our own separate septic area. We found out about neighbors who wanted to purchase the land we were looking at so that nobody lived there, which just sets you up for failure because they don't want you there in the first place. We found out about
our lunging neighbor with the F off.
We passed by a piece of land where the neighbor next door...
we were walking that land.
We were walking the land, and the neighbor next door had signs on his window that said, F off, get the F off this area. You're being watched on 1,000 surveillance cameras. He came out of his house, like hands on hips, ready to just like go at us. Terrible neighbor. So just long-term effects, just meeting people like that going... I could never live next to somebody like that who has all that, even just having that stuff in their window. I don't want to see that every day.
Yeah, people spying on you. And
we had people spying on us. If we went and walked, they'd be looking out over fences and stuff. That was really uncomfortable. But at the same time...
Our land real estate agent knew the property, and he actually knew that the guy turned his gun range towards
to
fire over
land.
The land that was for sale. So all that kind of stuff is big.
But at the same time, we also were able to meet really great people along the way. So there were a number of times where the people were really welcoming. They were asking us questions. They gave us a lot of information, and they were kind, and they were generous people to give information that you would want to live by, which is where we ended up now, is a place where when we talked to the neighbors, it was a great experience. It really did help seal off that it was a great area with people we could live by long term. So that is really important in the long run.
The last thing, but certainly not the least.
One of our most important to-dos.
You must have a land realtor. Not a realtor, not a housing realtor. You must have a land realtor. And
not a housing realtor who is willing to do land.
No, they are not the same.
Because there are some that are like, sure, of course, I can give it the old college try.
Yeah.
And that's great, but...
Yeah, you wouldn't learn history from a math teacher, and you wouldn't learn physics from
an English
teacher, right? This is the exact same thing. They're so fundamentally different, and land is by far way more complex than housing. And so you have to have that expertise, you have to have that experience. There's just no getting around that.
Well, one of the fastest ways we learned that was when we called a realtor, and Kirk does a lot of research on his own, and when Kirk knew more about land real estate than the realtor knew, just by him reading title reports himself and doing research, that was when we knew it was not advantageous for us at all to use somebody who wasn't familiar with land, because
they had zero value to me.
They had zero value, especially with Kirk doing all the research himself. We needed somebody who can give us experience in the land arena. So things they can add value to is, one, he gave us the tip on talking to the neighbors, which saved us.
He spoke to neighbors himself.
And he was able to give us insight based on talking to other agents, because one of our experiences where we wanted to put an offer and we were forming contingencies and we brought him to the site with us to talk to the agent. Our experience with the agent when she was talking directly to us was horrible. She didn't tell us anything. Every answer to every single question we had was, read the report. It's in the report. I don't know. I have no idea. It's in the report. When he talked to her, he got
spewed the beans.
Oh, he got insight upon insight about the land, about the area, about the neighbors. There was a gang of neighbors that scared off the last people who bought. The water source was impossible to get at that land. And so there was key things that really dissuaded us from ultimately buying the land because of the rapport he's able to build with agents. There's just a level of respect in the industry.
Well, and he's an expert, and he was talking to a housing real estate agent, so he just sucked all the information, and whatever information she had.
That we would have never been able to get without him.
Yeah. An experienced one will be able to read the prelim, will be able to read the plat maps and the easements and walk you through it and help you find the surveys. All that type of stuff matters. And if you're, even if they're not good at it, you really should get a real estate attorney to read it, right? And that's going to depend on the competency and your confidence in the land realtor. So someone who's been doing it for a long time is going to be able to just, give you all of that intel through their experience and stuff.
Yeah, interpreting the maps when you're in the physical location is different than interpreting the maps on a piece of paper, because you can understand it when you're looking at the paper reading it, but then when you're standing on 10 acres and you can't figure out which direction to go in and which rock to turn around to find this survey stick, it really does take somebody who has experience going, okay, well, it doesn't have to be a stick with a pink flag on it. It's likely this here. I can identify it because of X, Y, and Z. And knowing how to navigate the actual terrain in person is a whole skill set in and of itself, because you'll be out there just looking around at acres of land going, it should be, do we have to cross the little creek? Do we jump over here? Is it before? It says it's after. So knowing how to do that in person, it adds real value.
And in our area, just when you get to actual offers and deals, that expertise, especially when they're working with a housing realtor who knows nothing, it really facilitates that process and catching all of the errors that could just be a nightmare down line, it's just a comedy of errors that occurs when you have land real estate people doing land real estate deals. And so when that paperwork comes down the pipe, for us, it was a comedy of ridiculous errors.
Every piece of paper we got was riddled with errors.
Both of us were just bleeding on these documents, just redlining everything for day after day after day. And he saw stuff that I wouldn't even have thought to see, and I caught just blatant stuff, having read these things and looked at them and analyzed them for a year. So just tremendous value, nose to tail in the process, and it's a different beast altogether.
Yeah. It's almost a different industry. So those are the top 6 things that we learned to do in our land hunt. Hopefully this helps you out. If you have questions, let us know, because there is so much more, but we tried to condense it into something watchable for you, but there's a lot more. So ask questions in the comments. Let us know if you're looking for land. And if you are, good luck. We're on your side. And if you
We're rooting for you.
We are rooting for you, because while it's
a fun journey,
excruciating, one of the favorite things that we had during the journey was all the road trips every weekend, just hours in the car looking at all these beautiful places, and just have fun along the adventure. It will end. You will find something, and you'll have a lot of memories to look back on all the mistakes and all of the places that you looked at. So just enjoy the journey is the best advice, and get a hybrid or an electric car while you're doing it, because you'll be trekking around.
The journey is gratifying, is what I'll say in hindsight. Good luck.
Good luck. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe.
And join us on Patreon. You know my samurai sword out. like an antenna. In the front, you can't even see it. Except for when he like pokes out like I got a nub on the top of my head.
I like it there. That's why I put it there.
No, it looks stupid.
That's why I said I wanted to do it. Just put it a little higher.
You can't see it from the front.
It's the angle of your hair. It looks different.
It looks weird like that.